Mary, thank
Brilliant.
you so much for joining me on the Mindful podcast.
Oh, Dermot, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, I've been looking forward to it for a long time because we were lucky enough to have a little stint together, a little hors d'oeuvre on the radio about a year ago, where you were offering your expertise to the nation. And you handed me a copy of your number one bestseller. And I have very much enjoyed reading it. And I have to say, a little bit of me was a little bit anxious about reading it because I was hoping that it wouldn't make me worried for my children more than I generally am. But actually,
Yeah.
it's beautifully reassuring. And for anyone who doesn't know, anxious children in an anxious world, facing fears and finding brave. And we're talking about bravery today. And it is, I think it is just a very kind manual for parents and their kids in terms of understanding what's going on. And like I said, it's super reassuring. That everything is very normal and you can deal with it all. And you can't help but as you try and share these techniques and tips with your children with feeling the benefits of them yourself as well, and I think that's an amazing key and not surprising, because I hear it's recently won an award in the US.
Oh, it has indeed. The Eric Hoffer Book Award. Dermot, I couldn't believe it. I was over the moon. The number one bestseller was phenomenal. But then to have
Mm,
it recognised again later, it was just lovely. But you know what? Comments like yours that you found it reassuring are actually more important than any award. Funny, Dermot, I remember I'd written a book previously, okay?
mm,
Perfectly Imperfect Parenting. And I wrote that book as a letter to my children. And that book is actually all about social and emotional development. But my dad died when I was really young. He died when I was 9. And I think anyone who's lost a parent young, you know that life is not a promise. And I thought if anything happens to me, I want to give something to my children.
mm.
So I wrote that book, and you know what it's like writing a book. Like at the end of it, you're thinking, never, ever again. So I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm never doing this again. But I'll never forget the day I decided to write this one. And it was, so I have 3 kids, and one of mine struggles with anxiety. And I was on social media and I thought, you know, one of these things that come up like these memes, whatever.
Mm,
And it was, good mums have messy kitchens but happy children. And at the time, one of my children was really not happy and was really struggling. And I know the message was meant to be, ah, sure, don't worry about the mess. But that it didn't feel that way. It felt like, but if I'm a good mum, my kids should be happy. And it
mm.
literally cut to the core. And I
And do you
remember,
find in your position, because you do the work that you do, there's a higher level of expectation, and people go, "Hang on a sec, your child has issues with
oh,
anxiety. Aren't you meant to be on top of that, compared to
oh,
the rest of us?"
Dermot, absolutely. And funny, that was why the first book was perfectly imperfect, because I keep saying I am
Mm,
so imperfect in my parenting. But you don't have to be perfect. You just have to do your best. And good enough is good enough. And it's all about connection. And that's what's really important. Because I do think you feel under this pressure. I think every parent feels it. But you know, Dermot, we do it to each other as well. You know, the judgment. Do you ever see,
mm,
like maybe somebody in America is really famous and they put something up on Instagram, they're putting their kid into a car, and suddenly there's this pile-on and, oh my gosh, that car seat isn't in correctly, and you're this. We're so judgmental of each other.
mm.
I don't think, sort of in my mum's day and my grandmother's day, like it was so different back then. And even the word parenting it wasn't a verb, didn't exist. You piled them all into the car and you did what you could. It feels like in modern day society, oh, the level of judgment and the level of expectation. And I think then if your kid is struggling, it's like, oh, I have failed. I've failed. I mean, it's my fault. And part of the book was to tell parents as well, you know, kids struggle with anxiety for lots of reasons, and you can't wave a magic wand and get rid of it. There is lots of stuff you can do, but the number one thing to start with is to stop just blaming yourself and think, okay, let's work as a team and how can we help them, you know?
Mm. Do you know one of your tips that I really loved is don't become the second chicken? Could you
Oh,
could you explain that for people? Because I think it's a great
oh,
starting point. If
okay.
for this conversation. So tell us about the second chicken. How do we not become one?
Oh, damn. I should start by squawking at this point because I am the second chicken, and I have to say that. So, this idea comes from a book called The Opposite of Worry by a man called Lawrence Cohen. And I remember reading the book, Dermot, and he starts talking about when he was in high school. He's an American
Mm,
psychologist, and he did this experiment, if you like, on chickens. So, we talk about fight or flight. Well, chickens go into freeze. It's called tonic immobilization for chickens. So, he did this experiment and he put these chickens in a pen and gave them a fright. Now, I have a vegetarian who's very anti Lawrence Cohen and is scaring chickens, but we'll go with that for the moment. So he puts them in, gives them a fright, and times them. Okay, so he did it with lots of
mm,
chickens. On average, they freeze between 1 and 2 minutes when they get a shock. So it's their way of going into fight or flight. Then tried another experiment. So he has the chicken in there, gives it a fright, it freezes. And then he just gently pops another chicken into the pen. So the second chicken, no fright, turns around, sees the first chicken, and it's as if it thinks, Jesus Christ, what's happening here? I don't know, there's something going on. It freezes. But he timed them. They freeze for up to 5 minutes. And the message of the story is think about how you respond to your child because so many of us become that second chicken and it's love. We see our child struggling and it's like, and within our brains, we go into fight or flight and we start panicking and we feed off each other. And when I saw it, the first time I read the story, Dermot, I thought, hold on a minute, because he does kind of say, think about your parenting. And I thought,
mm.
but I'm not an anxious parent. And his message is kind of, anxious child means anxious parent. And I thought, oh yeah, here we go. Freud, blame it all on the mother. It's me again. I thought, no, 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 I'm not that anxious. But then, when I stopped to think, I thought, I parent my child who struggles with anxiety in a more anxious way. So the other two
Mm.
might come in and they go, so mine are older now, and they go, oh, I'm thinking about going here at the weekend, or I might do this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what the. My child who struggles with anxiety comes in and goes, oh, I was invited to this, but I'm not sure if I'll go. And I'm like, oh, pet, but do you want me to give you a lift? Or, I could wait outside. What do you think? Because my anxiety levels are going. And, Dermot, I just think it's such an important message for parents. Don't be the second chicken. Step back from the child. It's the bravery thing.
Mm.
Our job is to help them find the bravery. They already have it within them. It's just finding it again.
Yeah, beautifully put. Because I think it's a natural thing. We want so badly to help them. A
Yes.
lot of the feelings parents have when our child is suffering with something like anxiety is helplessness. So
Yes.
we tend to go into overparent mode, and I guess then we're in danger of trying to take on some of that anxiety for them, and before we know it, we're a second chicken.
Yep. And it's really true. And it's funny because we absolutely do it out of love. You
Mm,
love your child so much and you see them, you scared of whatever it is in the world. And I often think about the first day of school as a good example. And I do a lot of talks for parents on the transition from preschool to primary. So their kids are starting school. And I'm saying to them, your child is going in and you're trying to help them be brave and you're being positive and you drop them off and your face crumbles and they see fear in your face.
yeah.
And their brain, their amygdala in the middle of their brain goes, look at her. She thinks this is awful. She's terrified. So we're just igniting their fear. And
Mm.
it's so hard not to do it. And I mean, I'm holding my hand up here, like I do it. But it's about really trying to be calm. Being the port in the storm is what they really need from us. But oh, it's
Mm.
hard.
Yeah. Well, in the book, you go into a lot of detail in all kinds of anxiety because let's face it, all children are different, all
Yeah.
humans are different. So, just to read out a list of the kinds of things that you deal with, and then maybe you can choose a few to zone in on that you
Yeah.
feel are most relevant in terms of your experience and your practice and everything. So, the separation anxiety maybe taps into something we're talking about on those first days of school.
Yeah.
Um, selective mutism, social
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, school related anxiety, specific phobias, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and anxiety about world events in general.
Yeah.
So, where would you like to
Yeah.
start in that list? What were the ones that you feel that people are dealing with the most?
Do you know what I have to say, Dermot?
Mm,
Because I mean, obviously in the book, I want to say, okay, here's all the stuff your child might be
yeah.
going through. But you know, I think one of the most important things is to actually normalize it all and to step back and
Mm,
say, every one of us gets anxious. So even
yeah.
though these are times when your child is really caught up in that anxiety, we want to normalize it to them. We want to let them know that everyone gets anxious. And even parents sometimes say to me, oh, but you know, don't get anxious. And I think, do you remember your leaving cert? What about your driving test? Or have you ever given a best man speech? Like, we all do it. And I think that's a really important message. Anxiety is normal. It's really,
Mm,
really normal. And it happens to us all. And so sometimes it's taken further with our children. But if we go back to their brain development, before I even think about what they might be struggling with, it's to know that it's normal and we all experience it. You know, and you've just hit the nail on the head with what you're saying there. Anxiety is disempowering. It's really disempowering for the child. It's really disempowering for the parent. So I suppose what I like to start with is by saying, I like to explain to kids what's happening in their brains because it helps them take their power back before they even think about what's really going on. Is to
mm,
know every one of us has this. And I actually say to parents, use the language of anxiety, like talk to them about, well, I always say with little ones, emotional brain right in between the ears, thinking brain here, emotional brain here. And for the little ones, that's enough. But once they get older, I use the word amygdala. And I say, imagine him, this little fella, and he's living in here. I always say, imagine him like a toddler. But we all have an amygdala. So every one of us, and for parents to know that too, that parents sort of think there's something wrong with my child because they have separation anxiety, or there's something wrong with my child because they have school anxiety. But actually, we all get this. So this little part of our brain, the amygdala, we call it the seat of fight or flight. So it's on alert, taking in information from our senses to keep you safe. So that's the first message for kids. This little fella's trying to keep you safe. You know, he's in here and he's trying to keep you safe. And he's taking in information, but sometimes he overestimates what's happening in the world and he underestimates you. He underestimates what you have within you. And he panics. He goes into a panic. But the difference between some of our children, so the children who are sort of going along, getting a little bit nervous and stuff, and the kids who are having that list you described, the real difference there is this little fella, for some of our children, I always say, sort of imagine him like a smoke alarm. So if you imagine a smoke alarm in your house, it goes beep, 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 and we think, oh, what's happening? It's not actually telling you your house is burning down. It could be just burnt toast. It's just recognizing danger. Well, our amygdala is the same. For some of our kids, no matter how they're experiencing it, it's important to know that it's like that dial is just a little bit too sensitive. So their smoke alarm is just highly sensitive and
mm.
is going off in ways that it very often needn't. So more important than what type of anxiety is the fact that they're all the same. This little part of the brain is going off, but for some of them, it's just heightened. And funny, I often say to parents, think of kids on roller coasters. I'm terrified of heights, Dermot. Really, really bad. Hate them, hate them, hate them. And the thought of going on a roller coaster is like, oh my gosh. And I think, imagine your kids on a roller coaster. So, like, I have three kids. One of mine struggles with anxiety. So, if I imagine the three of them on a roller coaster, now on they go. The the two who don't struggle with anxiety so much, they still have an amygdala, but it's as if when they're on the roller coaster, their amygdala is going, "Ah, this is terrifying. Oh, it's so exciting!" Like their amygdala is reacting, but at a certain level. But for the child who struggles with anxiety, it's as if their amygdala is reacting with, I am going to die. I am going to die. And if the
Mm.
bar comes down and they're thinking, "Ah, it didn't come right down. I could slide from under it." And they're at the top and they're thinking, oh, we could shoot off this thing. Like their amygdala is just completely overestimating the danger and underestimating their ability to cope with it. And even starting from that, I think really, really helps because you suddenly think it's not that there's something really wrong with my child. We kind of just have to reteach this little part to their brain. We have to help it to shift. So, say it's separation anxiety and it's little ones leaving you and going into school or whatever. Very often, with separation, very often sometimes they're frightened something will happen to you when they're gone. And they're thinking there's potential danger. So it's about connection, reconnecting with that child, maybe little transitional objects, pebble in my pocket, a little love heart on the wrist, a love heart on your wrist, and it's it's connection back to you. You know, an older child maybe with school anxiety, very often they've completely overestimated that danger in school. So say teacher says, oh, we're going to do reading today. They're sitting in the classroom and they're thinking, oh, okay, I'm fifth in here. If she starts with them, what line will I get to read?
Mhm.
It's building within them, but it's no matter which one it is, it's about coming back and connecting with that child, helping them register safety, if you like, giving them tools. And it's like your mindfulness books, your work on mindfulness. I do a lot of lecturing in early ed, and so many of my students do mindfulness with their kids all the time now, Dermot. So
Mm.
if we teach our children about what's happening in their brain, but then we give them techniques like, I do my deep breathing. And even with little ones, you'll sometimes say, the cocoa is
Yeah.
hot and you're blowing the cocoa. We're teaching them these little techniques so they realize my brain isn't wrong. There's nothing wrong with me.
Mm.
It's just that my brain is oversensitive. This little toddler is in there and he's panicking. And I need to just send him the messages to calm down and to breathe. That I look at my students, the preschool practitioners, and I say to them, you're changing the world. You're coming along and you're getting these little ones at 2, 3, and 4. Like I'm lecturing in psychology and I'm looking at the research on the teenagers who are really, really struggling at the moment in Ireland, internationally. And I'm looking at these teenagers, but then I'm looking at my preschool practitioner students. I'm thinking, I always say to them, you are the ones who are
Mm.
absolutely changing things because you're educating the little ones now. You're teaching them. You don't have to be scared of this. There's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is a little oversensitive. And these are the tools that you can use to sort of
Mm.
self-regulate when this happens. Um,
It's
and it,
funny you're talking about those the fear of, in the classroom of they're going to come to me next, and
yeah,
how those little worries can live in us. I was doing a teacher training course in Switzerland recently, and I was at the start, and they started at the back saying, "Hey, do people want to just stand up and introduce themselves and maybe just give a couple of sentences in your terms of your background and where you're from?" And
yeah.
it started, and I was suddenly overtaken by that school anxiety of, oh Jesus, they're going to come to me, and now he's closer, and it's closer, and it's closer. And I stood up, and I'm like, "Hi, I'm Dermot, and I'm a meditation teacher." And I was like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
look at you!" And it was fascinating to see that these little nuggets, these little triggers can still be in there,
Oh,
and the
yeah,
kind of I was kind of laughing at myself then. I was like, it's funny that that little toddler, even with all the intellectual knowledge you can pick up throughout your life, it can still be in there and be feeling a little bit, insecure. And it was
yeah,
interesting just to watch myself and go, wow.
yeah,
And then I was using my own, the breathing
yeah.
techniques that you have in your book too, and brought myself back around. But
It's so
I
true.
yeah, and I guess
Mm,
old me would have been going, "What's wrong with you? Oh my God, get yourself together. Why are you not as confident as the
yeah,
people here?" Whereas now I was like, "God, that's funny. That little kid is still in there." You know,
yeah.
but isn't
Oh,
it great? We
Dermot.
have the tools.
And that's exactly it, though, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
funny, I think sometimes, and one of the things I say in the book is to parents, I can't give you a magic wand to wave away anxiety. That's not how it
Mm.
works. And some of our children have this predisposition. They come into the world more sensitive souls, and the way our brain works, our brain is constantly on the lookout for danger because it wants to keep us safe, wants to keep us alive. So the negativity bias, we say, we're always on the lookout for things that might harm us. So if you come into the world a more sensitive soul with them, if I always think about that
Mm.
dial on the smoke alarm a little bit more sensitive, it becomes this cycle, and there's a part of our brain called hippocampus, and the job of that part of the brain is to store and organize our memories. So it nearly becomes this little loop. So the sensitive souls go down this loop. And in many ways, I think of my own child, I think that's who they are, but it's just as you said, it's the tools. You know, I think through my child's life, there's going to be points that this will come up. And I mean, here was I a minute ago saying, I'm not an anxious parent. I mean, we all are at times. I mean, just as you said, we all struggle sometimes with anxiety. But for every one of us, if we can just get those tools, we won't always get it right. But if we can,
Mm.
generally speaking, start to learn, no, these feelings are going to come. They are going to come. But when they come, there are things I can do to
Yeah.
protect myself.
Well, look, I'm conscious that we have parents listening and watching now who are have their own specific cases in mind to do with
Hmm.
their own children. They could be smallies, a kind
Yeah.
of 8 to 12 area, or maybe it's the teens.
Hmm.
So I'd love to use the rest of the time to maybe just drill down into the type of scenarios. Is the kids at nighttime getting anxious and wanting to come into your bed, the different scenarios that you see, and the specific tools that you think, look, for this
Can help.
situation, this is helpful.
Yeah.
So let's start with the younger ones,
Yes.
so and work our way up.
Okay. Well, one of the things that's really useful is a process called laddering. So if we think I was talking about fight or flight, and it's actually
Yeah.
fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, but it's too hard to say. Um, if we think about the little ones who are maybe don't want to sleep in their own bedroom at night, or that separation anxiety,
Mm.
there's this tool called laddering. Most of us um, flight. So we avoid. We desperately try to avoid the things that make us anxious. Every child, whether they're little or right up, is avoidance. And something that can be so helpful is baby steps, gradually exposing yourself to anxiety. Now, from a parental point of view, this feels completely counterintuitive. My little one is too anxious to sleep on their own in the room. They're struggling going into school. I want to wrap you up. I want to keep you safe and protect you. So we sometimes support avoidance. If we can actually do the opposite, and it is helping them find that bravery they have within them, it can really, really help. So if I just say laddering for
Mm.
the little ones, um, there is something called if we what I should explain laddering first. So the whole idea of laddering is you are building a ladder to where you want to be. So you're going to take baby steps to expose your child to the things that are making them anxious. Like I just
Mm.
say, before you do this, it's really important that you look at self-regulation tools. So whether that's the mindfulness activities, the breathing, when the anxiety comes, we need to give them some way of coping with it, some way of dealing with it. And I mean, just say breathing, for example, is really effective. And as I said, for little ones, it can be blowing the coke or whatever, but you're giving them the tools. Give them the tools, the mindfulness tools to cope with when they feel this way, because that helps them just br- take space in that
Mm.
moment. Um, we talk about something called Jill Bolt Taylor coined this term, the 90-second rule. The idea is if you can just breathe, if you can just take space for 90 seconds, you're giving your whole body time to come back down. But the laddering is you take baby steps. So say it's a little one who doesn't want to be away from mum and it's separation anxiety. The whole idea, that first step on the ladder would be literally you're ironing in the corner of the room, but they're in the other room. You tell them, I'm not going to sneak off on you. I'm not going to step away from
Mm.
you, but I'm doing this. I'm here. You can see me, but I'm not sitting with you. Then the next one might be moving into an adjoining room where they can look into the adjoining room and see you. Each step on the ladder is a baby step towards independence. And you take time to slowly, slowly, slowly bring them up that ladder to where they want to be. We sometimes think we need to throw our children into stuff. And that will just flood your brain with anxiety.
Mm.
It's all about taking baby steps. Now, say you have an older child. So say you have a teenager who, and it's a huge issue at the moment, is school anxiety. It's exploding. So say you have a teenager who's struggling with school anxiety. It's really, really similar. You're going up the ladder, you're gradually exposing them, but you can do something which is really helpful called the imagined edge. So remember I was saying if you imagine within your brain the amygdala as a smoke alarm, can't tell the difference between the house burning down and burnt toast. So this part of your
Mm.
brain thinks you might be in danger and it responds. We can actually use that. And how we use that is we imagine the thing that makes us anxious. And if you imagine it really clearly, your amygdala goes into overdrive. And so say, for example, if I am looking at, you see these videos online where you're watching somebody else go on a roller coaster. If I watch that, I feel, whoa, I feel the adrenaline through my arms.
Mm.
I feel my breathing change. I feel whoosh through my stomach. I'm not actually in danger. I'm watching a video, but my brain, my amygdala is responding as if I'm there. So it responds to imagined things as it would the real thing. So if you get a teenager who's struggling, and again, if we think about laddering,
Mm.
you can get them. Remember, you've taught them their breathing. You've really focused on the tools they will use to self-regulate first. But then, if they are really struggling, say they haven't been in school, you get them to literally lie with you and imagine getting up in the morning, you brushing your teeth, washing your face, putting on the uniform. Now that might be the first step on the ladder. That will make them feel anxious. They breathe themselves down. They imagine it again. You do the breathing to bring yourself down. You keep working on that first step of the ladder until you start to feel more in control. The way our brain works is the neural pathways in our brain that we use more often become more embedded. So for kids struggling with anxiety, the pathways of fear and avoidance are really embedded. If we imagine that, we are actually teaching our brain to rethink these situations. These pathways are becoming more embedded in terms of actually, I breathed that down. I was okay. I coped okay. That wasn't as bad as it seemed. Now they're still only imagining it. They're not doing it, but you work up the ladder. The next step might be imagining getting in the car with dad and driving to school. The next step might be going into that first class or just going in for break time or going in for PE, whatever class it might be. But you're working up a ladder of imagining, visualizing these
Mm.
things that give you that anxiety. And in each step in the ladder, you're breathing yourself down. You're actually changing the neural pathways in your brain. Now, Dermot, I say this as if it's easy, and it's not. It's really takes time and practice. But the goal is if you do it in this way, where the imagined edge, it's like imagining yourself looking off the edge of a cliff. For me,
Mm.
if you imagine it, you get to the point where they realize they have the bravery within them to do it. And at
Mm.
that point, you push them out of the comfort zone.
What about bedtime? I think that is a place where anxiety can show its face a little bit
Yeah.
more. I know for my daughter, when she was that age, sort of between 9 and 12,
Hmm.
bedtime became a sort of an anxious time where she just wanted to be in with us the
Yeah.
whole time. Now she grew out of it, and now we're like, come into the bed for snuggles. And she's like, no way. She's 14 now and just no interest. But it can be an upsetting time, and the whole family can be dreading bedtime because they know what's coming.
Yeah.
And you don't want to say, look, no, you can't come into the bed. For us, we
Yeah.
just went, sure, come in.
Yeah.
And as I say, she grew out of it herself. But
Yeah.
could there have been any other steps? Is it laddering? Is it bit by bit, or how would you approach that? Because I do hear it from a,
Yeah.
a lot of people say it to me. Suddenly, I don't know where my little girl really anxious at bedtime. She's 10, and now she's freaking out. So what do you do in those scenarios?
Very often something has triggered it. If they've never had it, something's triggered it. And at the moment, you look at the world, and
Mm.
even though we're trying to protect them, they're hearing snippets on the news, they're hearing stuff on the radio in the car, and sometimes even something that you haven't thought about, they can have heard about something that absolutely triggers fear. So obviously, always, connection and communication get to the bottom of it. But there's
Mm.
two things I have to say with this one, Dermot, because with a child like a little one who just doesn't want to separate from you, it's the same thing. It's the laddering. So you sit on their bed and you say to them, I'm not going to be able to talk to you, but I'm sitting here and I will not sneak out. I will not leave you. And you stay
Mm.
in the bed and you do that for how many days? Then you move to a chair beside the bed. Again, I'm not going to sneak out. I'm not going to leave you. Then you move to a chair at the door of the bedroom. You're going along to get them to leave you. Now, having said that, can I just say something?
Mm.
All three of mine, when they were little, would sneak into my bed at 4 in the morning. And I know people are really strict and they say, you put them back. You put them back into your bed and don't allow them in. You know what? I think every one of us is woken up at 4 in the morning, and life feels scarier at 4 in the morning, and the
Yeah.
world is dark outside. And I know a friend of mine had said to me, her little one said to her, but why can you and Daddy sleep together? But I have to be on my own in the room. And I'm kind of with her. So I
I
have to be
loved
honest.
that. It was like, oh yeah, this whole thing is rigged. You guys have a pal every night. I've got nobody except the freaky Teddy with the missing eye.
It's so true. So on that basis, mm, I always let mine come in and they grew out of it. Now, I do understand if parents are having that separation, that at bedtime, the child is crying and crying at bedtime and doesn't want to be on their own in the bed, that baby steps, you're gently moving
Mm.
away. You're building up their tolerance and you're letting them see they can survive without you. So you're building their bravery. But on the other hand, you kind of feel, no, it's like the school anxiety, Dermot. So with so many kids with school anxiety, I always say it's the same thing. It's education. We teach them about the brain. Then we do the mindfulness. We teach them the how to
Mm.
self-regulate. Then we baby steps. And that's perfect because the house is not burning down. It's just burnt toast. But I'm speaking to parents whose children have horrific school anxiety. And many of them might be neurodivergent. Maybe they've been bullied. Maybe they have sensory issues. For those children, the house is burning down. And, if I'm being bullied, no amount of breathing is just going to make that okay. If I have huge sensory issues, like kids going into secondary school, suddenly it's moving from lockers, it's the smells, the canteen, it's the noise level. Everybody's so big. If I'm in complete sensory overload, we have to deal with that first. Their house is burning down. Like their amygdala is right.
Mm.
This is not good. So it's very individual, actually. We know that process, educate, self-regulation, finding the bravery, we know that works. But you always have to be aware of what's going on with that child. And if there are underlying issues, we come right back to them
Mm.
first. Because for so many parents I'm hearing from at the moment, particularly with the school anxiety, they can't do this on their own because they need the school to support their child's issues if their child is neurodivergent or sensory issues or
Mm.
bullying, whatever it might be. And that's has to be a team effort. It's not going to work otherwise.
Mm. Talk to me about teens then, because
Oh,
you do touch on some
yeah.
fairly stark statistics in the book. And again, it's
Oh,
not an effort to
Dermot.
frighten everybody, but it, it,
No,
it is real. I mean, you say 50% of Irish young people will have mental health issues by the age of 24. That's half of our kids.
Dermot, this is Professor Mary Cannon, who is
Mm.
wonderful. Now, she conducted this research prior to COVID. I'd love to see her come back and do it again now.
Yeah.
So she looked at the huge research project. She's the Royal College of Surgeons and very well renowned, so very trustworthy research. But so her first statistic was 1 in 3. By the age of 13, 1 in 3 of our children will have experienced a mental health difficulty, and anxiety was the top. By 24, half of them. And you know what's really scary, Dermot? Those figures were higher than the
Mm.
UK and the US. And I really wonder about this because I talk a lot in the book about finding your inner bravery. Like your child has to find the brave, and in order for them to, you have to. That's unheard of. For our figures to be higher than the UK and the US made no sense to me. And I was really thinking about it, and that's only a theory. It's absolutely only a theory. But I wonder, I think, so say back in my mum's generation and my
Mm.
grandmother's generation. So it was always the females were responsible for the parenting of the children. So in their generations, they gave us freedom. So my childhood, get out on the road and play, we'd caravan in Arklow. You'd wake up in the morning, you'd let yourself out, you'd knock on the bunk room and the caravan beside you and the kids would come out. We came home when we were hungry. I mean, so many people in my generation have had that childhood. And we actually became quite resilient because we had that freedom. Like we gained a huge amount from that childhood, that freedom of exploration. And we were in multi-age groups and whatever. But
Yeah.
my mum's generation and my grandmother's generation believed their children were safe. And then they realized that a lot of their children had not been safe. Now, I know this happened in the UK, in the US, around the world, but I wonder if in Ireland, those generations had absolute faith in authority, whether it was the church, whether it was doctors, politicians, teachers, they had absolute faith in authority. And I wonder if we had further to fall, because I think my generation became so scared. Dermot, we did this U-turn, and the way they talk about helicopter and lawnmower parenting, and I hate those terms, but I mean I have been both a helicopter and a lawnmower. We were so scared. We hover over everything that our children do, and I wonder if that control, we were so controlling, we were so scared that the resilience that my generation had from playing out on the road and you get out there and play, that our children never had. And I wonder if that's why our mental health figures like that. And as well, Dermot, I think we have become very controlling in the real world. Then we hand them a phone. They're not resilient. We like if you think about a playground, and I'll give myself an example because I'm an absolute wuss. But I remember when my kids were little, being these playgrounds with these big teepee things they climb up, and those terrifying things that they have in playgrounds, and I'd be there and I'd be all the time hovering over them. And my husband would say to me, Mary, go for a walk. Just go. He'd be saying, yay,
Mm.
climb up. You can go higher, encouraging them. And I'd be the opposite because I was so scared of something happening. We became so scared in playground stuff, in the real world, we hover. But then
Mm.
they hit, and it's getting younger and younger now. I mean, I was talking to a lady the other day who said it's communions. They're all getting phones. So we've overprotected them in the real world. Then we go, there you go. There's access to the internet. And most of us don't really think about what we're giving them access to. And
Mm.
in fact, we say, you're giving your child a phone, you're giving them access to the world. You're giving the world access to them, and they're not resilient. And I really wonder, and again, this is just, my theories, but I wonder if our overprotectiveness and our controlling of our children, particularly in Ireland, because we had so much further to fall, has contributed to their rising anxiety. And I'm not trying to blame parents. I'm really not, because I mean, I am that parent. Um,
Mm.
but I think, if we want our children to find their inner brave, Dermot, we've got to find ours.
Mm.
We've got to be brave and strong and let them see that they're strong and capable and get out there instead of constantly protecting.
Yeah. But I think, as you say, a lot of our generation risk taking as children was taken by ourselves or with our
Yes.
friends.
Yep.
Whereas if I think mine, go on, you can do it. We're there for a lot of our children's risk
Yes.
taking, which
Yeah.
adds an extra layer of security and I guess doesn't test their resilience. If you're
Yeah.
out in a bog in County Limerick and you're jumping off something with your pals,
Yep.
you're going to learn the hard way if something goes
Yes.
wrong,
Yeah.
but
And we learned so
uh,
much though. And we did.
yeah.
We broke arms and we sprained ankles. And
Mm.
somebody just said to me the other day, the other way, like when I was a kid, most people broke their arms, sprained their ankles. And this parent said to me, you don't hear of broken arms anymore. I thought, oh my gosh, why? because we're having now, I don't want to send all our kids off with broken arms. But Dermot, we became resilient. We became strong. So if I think about me as a kid back in that caravan park in Arklow, and all my cousins were there, and we got up in the morning, and we were in mixed age groups, and you were about to head off, and your mother said, bring your little brother, and you thought, oh God, and you dragged him along, and he was only 4, and he went along and was like, whoa, but he saw things 4-year-olds aren't seeing today.
Yeah, yeah.
But we learned to when to
But
stand up for ourselves, when to back down. Like we learned so much.
I guess saying this to our own teenagers in particular isn't a great help to them, saying, "Oh, we
No.
had such freedom when we were young," and they're like, "Well, what am I supposed to do about that?"
Yeah.
I'm mindful there's a lot of parents listening to this who may be struggling with a teenager and thinking, "I just don't know what to do. I can't communicate with them. They're obviously
Yeah.
anxious and are depressed. There's waiting lists 5 years long to get
Yeah.
them in to see any help." You must be seeing a lot of that because the statistics,
Oh,
point to that.
Dermot. Yeah.
Where do we start with that? Where does a parent start with that if that's what they're experiencing right now?
The first thing I would say, and I'm sure it's not what parents want to hear,
Mm,
is if you really see your teenager struggling, try and get their name on a waiting list. And that, I know that sounds awful, but get it on now. Parents very often wait and wait and wait, but the waiting list is so long. However, it's connection. Do you know what? I think sometimes we expect so much of them. They're living in a very different world to the world we lived in. I mean, even in terms of social media, they're dealing with stuff we never had to deal with. We absolutely never did. And so many of them are retreating to their rooms. So there's a few things, but one, it's quite an important little thing to be aware of for parents, and it's called locus of control, and it's something we know has really changed in teenagers. So there's research 5 decades ago. What
mm,
locus of control actually means is, do I believe I can control my world, or do I believe I'm at the mercy of the gods? Like there's nothing I can do. What we know is 5 decades ago, teenagers, they may have been wild, they may have been scooting around the place, they might have been drinking a flagon in the back of a field, but 80% of them believed they could control the world when something went wrong. So when something went wrong, they were like, okay, now it might be I'll work it out with my friend, or, but they thought they could figure out ways to deal with stuff. That has done a complete U-turn. 80% of teens now do not believe they can control their worlds. That leaves them very vulnerable. So many teenagers today as well, the research tells us, see mistakes as failure. They have perfectionist tendencies. They believe that they should be on top of everything. They believe their peers are on top of everything. So looking at the world, and they think everybody else is doing
mm.
well. And I mean, look at that statistic. By the age of 24, half of them, about 13, 1 in 3 of them have had a mental health difficulty. They're not doing well, but they don't see that. They see that the rest of the world is doing well. They
Because
believe that
I
they have to.
wonder, sorry to jump in, Mary, but
No,
it's
go
something
on.
that I hear. I've heard it with my own kids. Sentences like, I've got to maximize my potential. I feel like I'm not going to get it. The pressure seems to be coming from them. I know so many
Oh, yeah.
parents who are like, it's not us. We couldn't give a
Yeah.
monkeys about the junior cert or
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be. And they seem to be piling this pressure on themselves. And where does that come from? Where is that pressure coming from?
Huge pressure. I
Mm,
completely agree, Dermot. And I agree, it's not coming from parents. So many parents say the leaving cert. So many parents would say, I don't care. I want my child to achieve their potential, but I want their mental health to be good. I'm more concerned about my child than I am about the points. I think sometimes it is coming from schools, but it's more than that. We seem to put this pressure on our kids that they have to perform, that they have to, be whatever. They're a junior cert. They're talking about the points that they need to get into their course of choice. That comes from us. It comes from society, making them feel everything is about external validation. So it's the money you earn, how they look. I mean, they're looking for work to be done, and they're changing their appearance from a very young age. Everything is external validation. And we need as parents to start getting in as early as we can and letting them know, actually, no, it's internal validation is important. Mistakes are not failure. Mistakes are how you learn. Tell them about mistakes you made. Tell them about things that went wrong. Perfectionism, really try and pick up on the perfectionism. So when you see
Mm.
them do something, make them aware it's not the end of the world. And that might be like if you see your child thinking, no, I have to rub out my homework, I have to rub it out. Start saying to them, okay, now, next week, first time, first draft goes in. If your teen is constantly re-editing, no, first draft gone. If it is that they're frightened to play on the football team that they mightn't get the goal, we're going to go in, we're going to go for it, doesn't matter what the score is. We have to make them see life isn't about trying to come out number one. It's not, the world doesn't revolve around the points you get in your leaving cert. There's so much more to life. And it's not going to be easy to persuade them, Dermot, because I think this generation have been hearing this for years and years and years. Maybe it goes back to the Celtic Tiger when we all thought we became obsessed with what we had
Mm.
and we shifted society. But I mean, there's no easy answer for it, but absolutely it's really worrying. And I suppose it's the messages we give them about good enough is good enough.
Mm.
We want them to be strong and independent and capable, but we parent them in a way that we hover and we do everything and we don't allow them to be independent. Even as I said in play, we're hovering over their play. And I think it's probably about getting in earlier, younger with children, and actually starting to, when we talk about safe risk taking, but encourage them to get out there and take risks, even in their play. There was a big piece of research done post-COVID. It was the University of Exeter, and they looked at parental attitudes to outdoor play, to adventurous play, to risky play, and how their kids coped during COVID and during lockdown. Unsurprisingly, the kids whose parents were much more proactive in sort of getting them outdoors, yay, a bit of adventure, go faster on your bike. Those parents, the kids coped better because that amygdala I was talking about earlier, when they were going fast on that bike, their amygdala was thinking, whoa, don't know if I like this. This seems scary. They were having shaky feelings in their arms. Their heart was pounding. They were having all the feelings of anxiety, but they were doing it and they thought, whoa, that was scary. But I did it. The little ones were being pushed that bit higher on the swing. The little ones going up the climbing wall. Yay, you can do it. Or in the playground, as I said, on that thing I'm terrified of. Go on, you can go higher. Their hearts were pounding. They were experiencing anxiety through play. So when COVID hit, those kids were more resilient. Those kids knew that life sometimes gets a bit scary, but you know what? We all hold hands and we get through it together, like we survive.
Mm.
It's such an important message for parents. But I do think we have to start it young. And I know that's not very helpful for the parents of teens. For the parents of teens, it's now trying to reconnect with them and maybe re-educate them, which is harder. It's
Mm.
definitely harder. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. I was talking about our brains, how our brains are wired. When our kids are little, we talk about brain plasticity, and basically it means our brains can just rewire. They're learning, they're growing, they're changing. So when our kids are little, their brains are really plastic. Middle childhood, yeah, they're tooting along. Teenage years, whoa, brains become really plastic again because they're going through something called
Mm.
pruning. So little pathways that aren't needed anymore, don't need that, don't need that. But it's a great time for new stuff. So if there's a parent of a teen listening now thinking, oh no, it's too late. I've been really overprotective and now I'm really worried. Do not worry. Their brains are really wired for change. Connection. Connect with them now. Let them know what I was saying about we all get anxious. Tell them about when you did. Let them know it's normal. We all do it. And every baby step they take towards bravery, let them
Mm.
know how proud you are.
Do you know what I've heard a lot as well? And I'm not saying this will happen for every child and every teenager, but certainly a lot of instances that teenagers who are really struggling in school
Mhm.
and the whole leaving cert and all that are different aspects of things, as soon as they either, as soon as they found their tribe in another place,
Yeah.
everything changed. So maybe they left school went and did a particular course that they were really interested in, and suddenly everything seemed to just get a little bit easier. Um,
Yep.
I know of another kid who was really struggling in a very dark place, went to musical theater, and
Mm-hmm.
so they just came alive.
Yeah.
So, and these moments where they
Yeah.
find like-minded souls, they find people they can relate to,
Yeah.
and it just suddenly lifts the lid on that darkness that can be sitting on top of them.
Changes everything. But think about what you just said, Dermot. They leave school. They leave school and they finding their tribe is huge, but they
Mm,
also find something in life that they find, hey, I'm actually good at this, or I can do well at this, or I'm going to be brave and give this a try. But what are we doing in school? And I'm not shouting at teachers because I'm in connection with a lot of teachers, but we have to question what's happening in our school system. Why, I was talking to you about school anxiety. Why are so many children really struggling in school? They're struggling in primary school, and the transition to secondary seems to be knocking so many of them. Now, I know I've spoken about resilience, but also we need to think about the school system, because what's going on in that system that so many kids just cannot cope with it. They're not thriving. They're barely surviving. And so many of them are walking away. And I've heard exactly the same stories, Dermot. They go on
mm,
after school. Then maybe they do an apprenticeship, as you say, musical theatre, whatever it might be, but they find their little niche. They might get an apprenticeship in the hairdressers. They might go on to study something very technical in college. They find their little niche. What's happening in that school system that these kids are feeling so unsupported and so unseen? And I'm really not blaming teachers, because I feel it's the system is at
mm,
fault. Funny, Dermot, I sometimes talk to teens in secondary schools, and I say to them, the kids who struggle with anxiety, they're the brave ones. So if I'm going to secondary school, sure, I get up in the morning, I shove a bit of toast in, I hop on my bike, off I go, yay, and I roll in the door to school. That's not brave. There's no bravery. I mean, yay, if your child is experiencing that, if that's their life, brilliant. But there's no bravery. For some kids, getting out of bed in the morning is brave. Going to school is really brave. The little things that a lot of teens take for granted, for some kids, it takes bravery for them to do that. And one of the really important messages is that shows it's in there. You know, it's within you. It's not something you don't have. So often I find these teens don't feel that they're capable. They don't feel that they're brave. But my God, they're the ones that all these little steps, and it's about helping them to re-see that and rethink what they're doing so that they realize they have it within them. Even sometimes, when a teenager says, oh, whatever, whatever, about themselves, and you say, okay, so if John, your best friend, said that to you, what would you say to him? And they think, whoa, I'm being so hard on myself, because that's not what I'd say to John. I'm being really
mm.
harsh with myself. My expectations of myself are up there. But oh my God, if I saw my friend struggling, I would be kind. I would be empathetic. I wouldn't have those expectations. They put themselves under
Mm.
so much pressure, and so many of them, they just seem to have lost their self-worth or something. But I do think it's good that when they move on, and I'm hearing exactly the same, when they move on from school, and finding the tribe is a big one too, but it's also finding themselves, Dermot.
Mm.
They think, I am somebody. I'm worthy. Like, they seem to be losing that in that system. God,
Yeah,
that's sad.
yeah. But again, it's hopeful that as soon as they get a glimpse and a
Oh
chance to
yeah.
express themselves, it can
Yeah.
be truly transformative. And let's end on that hopeful note. Dr. Mary O'Kane, thank you so much for chatting to me today. I really, really appreciate it. I think people will get a lot out of that for their kids and for themselves. So keep up the amazing work. And are we going to get another book soon?
Oh, Dermot, I don't think so. I'm still recovering from the last one. You know what it's like. You need to take a step back.
Well, I think I've never given birth, but from what I hear, I think it could be like that. That as soon
Oh,
as you put the book out there, you immediately forget the hardship and the pain that it took to bring it into the world, and you go, okay, I'll do it again.
Oh,
So
don't
maybe,
let me enjoy this one for a while.
yeah. Well, congrats on all the success, the
Oh, thank
awards,
you.
and most of all, on all the help that you're sharing with everybody. It's really, really appreciated. Thanks so much, Mary. Lovely to chat to you.
Thanks, Dermot.